When everything falls apart, the water came without warning, shooting across Natalie Brooks's marble kitchen floor like a broken promise. She stood frozen in her designer heels, phone pressed against her ear, trying to maintain composure while explaining quarterly projections to her biggest investor. Behind her, the cabinet under the sink had transformed into a small waterfall. "Give me one moment, Gerald," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos. She set the phone down, grabbed every towel within reach, and searched frantically for the water shutoff valve. Nothing worked. The flood continued, relentless and unforgiving. 20 minutes later, she'd called 3 different plumbers. 2 weren't available, and the third quoted her a price that seemed designed to fund his retirement. Desperate, she scrolled through her phone until she found a local handyman service with decent reviews. The voice that answered was warm and unhurried. "Mitchell Home Services. This is Ryan. I have a situation," Natalie said, surveying the damage. "My kitchen is flooding, and I need someone here immediately. I can be there in 15 minutes. What's the address?" She rattled off her 5th Avenue location, and he didn't even pause at the upscale neighborhood. When the knock came exactly 15 minutes later, Natalie was impressed before she even opened the door. The man standing in her hallway wasn't what she expected. Ryan Mitchell looked like he'd walked off a magazine cover for rugged outdoor living. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled slightly at the edges and eyes the color of autumn leaves. He carried a weathered toolbox and wore work clothes that had clearly seen many jobs. "You're the flood?" he asked with a slight smile. "That would be me," Natalie replied, stepping aside. "Though technically, it's my sink that's the problem." Ryan walked past her, his boots leaving wet prints that she decided not to care about. He assessed the situation quickly, dropping to his knees and opening the cabinet. Water still dripped steadily, pooling around the base. "Main valve is behind here," he said, reaching back with one strong arm. "Should have it stopped in a second." True to his word, the water slowed and then stopped completely. Natalie exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "Thank you," she said, genuinely grateful. "I thought I was going to need an arc." He chuckled, a low sound that somehow filled her expensive kitchen with warmth. "Seen worse. Last week, a guy had water coming through his ceiling from the floor above. Turns out his kid tried to give the cat a bath in the toilet." Despite everything, Natalie laughed. Actually laughed. Something she rarely did during work hours, which technically never ended. The unexpected proposal while Ryan worked, Natalie found herself watching him. He moved with quiet confidence, explaining what he was doing as he replaced the broken pipe. His hands were calloused and capable, and she noticed a small scar along his left forearm. "You do this full-time?" she asked, leaning against the counter. "Mostly," he said, not looking up. "Landscaping, home repairs, whatever people need. Keeps me busy and close to home, close to home." He glanced up, those warm eyes meeting hers. "I have a daughter, Emma. She's 7. I like being available when she needs me." Something in Natalie's chest tightened. She couldn't remember the last time someone had prioritized anything over work, including herself. "That's nice," she said softly. "She's lucky." Ryan stood, wiping his hands on a cloth. "All fixed. Should hold up just fine now. But you might want to have someone check your building's plumbing system. This kind of pressure buildup usually means there's an issue somewhere else." "I'll call the building manager," Natalie said, reaching for her purse. "What do I owe you?" He named a price that was remarkably reasonable. As she wrote the check, an idea struck her. It was crazy, impulsive, and completely unlike her. But desperation made people do unusual things. "Can I ask you something?" she said, handing him the check. "Sure. Do you own a suit?" Ryan blinked, clearly not expecting that question. "I have one. For weddings and funerals." "Why?" Natalie took a breath. "I need a favor. A strange one. But I'll pay you well." He crossed his arms, curiosity sparking in his expression. "I'm listening." "There's a charity ball in 4 days. The Metropolitan Spring Ball. It's a huge event with everyone important in Manhattan real estate, and I need a date." "You want me to go to a ball with you?" "Yes. I know it sounds absurd. But all my usual options fell through, and showing up alone sends the wrong message in my industry. I need someone who can blend in, make small talk, and not embarrass me in front of investors." Ryan studied her for a long moment. "And you think a landscaper can pull that off? I think you carry yourself well. You're articulate. You don't seem easily intimidated. And honestly, you're probably the most genuine person I've talked to all week. How much are we talking?" She named a figure that made his eyebrows rise. "That's generous. It's important to me. But there's a condition." "Of course there is," he said with a hint of amusement. "If I do this, if I step into your world for a night, you have to spend a day in mine. Come see what I do, meet Emma, help me with a project I'm working on." Natalie hesitated. Her schedule was packed. Every hour accounted for. The idea of giving up a full day seemed impossible, but something in his steady gaze made her reconsider. "Deal," she said, extending her hand. His palm was warm and rough against hers. The handshake lasted a moment longer than professional, and when he left, Natalie stood in her newly repaired kitchen wondering what she'd just agreed to. Preparing for the impossible, the next 3 days passed in a blur of meetings, contract negotiations, and second-guessing her decision. Natalie arranged for a custom suit to be delivered to Ryan's address, along with detailed instructions about the event. She told herself this was purely business, a transaction, nothing more. But late at night, when the city lights flickered through her bedroom window, she found herself thinking about his laugh, the way he'd talked about his daughter, the calm presence he'd brought into her chaotic morning. On the morning of the ball, her assistant confirmed that Ryan had picked up the suit and would meet her at the venue. Natalie spent hours getting ready, choosing a midnight blue gown that shimmered like starlight. Her stylist twisted her dark hair into an elegant updo, and her makeup was flawless. She looked perfect, controlled, untouchable. Exactly what she needed to be. But as her car pulled up to the Grand Hotel where the ball was being held, butterflies danced in her stomach. She told herself it was just nerves about the event, about the deals she needed to close. The impressions she needed to make, it had nothing to do with Ryan Mitchell. Nothing at all. The doorman opened her car door, and Natalie stepped out into the flash of cameras and the murmur of New York's elite. She smoothed her dress, lifted her chin, and walked toward the entrance. Somewhere inside, a landscaper was waiting to pretend to be her date, and somehow, that felt more real than anything else in her carefully constructed life. The grand entrance, the Metropolitan Spring Ball, transformed the Imperial Hotel into something from a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen fireworks, and white roses climbed marble columns. A string quartet played soft melodies, while Manhattan's most powerful people glided across polished floors in designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. Natalie stood near the entrance, scanning the crowd with practiced ease. She knew most of these faces, had closed deals with half of them. But tonight felt different, and she couldn't quite name why. "Was looking for someone?" She turned at the sound of his voice and nearly forgot to breathe. Ryan Mitchell stood 3 feet away, and he'd been transformed. The custom suit fit him perfectly, emphasizing his broad shoulders and athletic build. His hair was styled, but still maintained that slightly wild quality. He'd shaved, revealing a strong jawline, but what struck her most were his eyes. They held the same warmth and steadiness she remembered, completely unfazed by the opulence surrounding them. "You clean up well," she managed, her voice softer than intended. "So do you," he said, his gaze traveling from her face to her gown and back again. "Though I'm pretty sure you could wear a garbage bag and still intimidate half the people here." She laughed, surprised by how much she needed that. "Is that a compliment?" "Absolutely." He offered his arm. "Shall we make an entrance?" They walked into the ballroom together, and Natalie felt the shift in attention immediately. Heads turned. Conversations paused. She was used to being noticed, but having Ryan beside her added a new dimension. He moved with quiet confidence, neither overwhelmed nor trying too hard to impress. "Everyone's staring," he murmured. "They're trying to figure out who you are. Should I be flattered or concerned?" "Both," she admitted. "Welcome to my world." Dancing through danger, the evening unfolded in waves of champagne and calculated conversations. Natalie introduced Ryan as a consultant, which was technically true if you stretched the definition. He surprised her at every turn. When her rival, Jessica Huang, asked about market trends, Ryan steered the conversation toward sustainable building practices with enough knowledge to sound informed but not arrogant. "Where did you learn about green architecture?" Natalie asked when they were alone. Already said simply, "And I work with soil, plants, natural systems every day. It's not that different from what you do, just on a smaller scale. I buy buildings. You make things grow. That's pretty different, is it?" He tilted his head thoughtfully. "You're creating spaces for people to live and work. I'm creating environments where things can thrive. Both require understanding what something needs to flourish." Before she could respond, the music shifted to something slower. Ryan extended his hand. "Dance with me." Her heart kicked against her ribs. "I should probably network more. You've been networking all night." "One dance won't hurt your empire." She placed her hand in his, and he led her onto the floor. His palm was warm against the small of her back, and she realized with a start how tall he was. In her heels, she still had to look up to meet his eyes. They moved together easily, naturally, as if they'd done this 100 times before. "You're a good dancer," she said. "My mom insisted on lessons when I was young. Said a man should know how to lead properly." His voice softened. "She passed away 3 years ago. I'm sorry. She would have liked you. She always said I needed someone who'd challenge me." "Is that what I do?" He smiled. From the moment you opened your door with wet towels and panic in your eyes, Natalie found herself smiling back, genuinely and without calculation. Around them, the ballroom continued its elegant choreography, but she barely noticed. In this moment, the only thing that mattered was the warmth of his hand and the steadiness of his gaze. Rooftop revelations an hour later. Natalie needed air. The ballroom had grown stuffy with perfume and ambition. She slipped through a side door that led to the hotel's rooftop garden, a hidden space most guests didn't know about. She wasn't alone long. Ryan found her leaning against the stone railing, the city spreading below them like a carpet of lights. "Escaping?" he asked, joining her. "Just breathing. Sometimes this world feels suffocating, then why stay in it?" The question was simple, but it cut deep. Natalie wrapped her arms around herself despite the warm spring air. "Because I worked hard to get here. I grew up in Queens with nothing. My parents cleaned offices so I could go to college. I built my company from scratch, proving myself every single day. Walking away would mean all that struggle was for nothing, or it would mean you proved you could do it, and now you get to choose what makes you happy." She turned to face him. "You make it sound easy? It's not. But Emma teaches me every day that life's too short to spend it doing things that drain you." He moved closer, his voice gentle. "You looked happier fixing a pipe leak than you have all night in that ballroom. That's ridiculous. Is it?" Before she could answer, he reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was tender and intimate, and it sent electricity racing down her spine. "Ryan," she whispered, unsure what she was asking for. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. When his lips met hers, the kiss was soft at first, questioning, then deeper, more certain, as if something locked inside both of them had finally found its key. When they broke apart, both breathless. Natalie felt the ground shift beneath her expensive heels. "That probably wasn't part of the deal," Ryan said, his forehead resting against hers. "Definitely not." "Should I apologize?" "Don't you dare." A different kind of day Saturday morning arrived, cool and clear. Natalie stood outside a community garden in Brooklyn, wearing jeans and sneakers that felt foreign after years of power suits and designer shoes. She'd agreed to Ryan's condition, and now she was here, about to enter his world. He appeared from around a corner, pushing a wheelbarrow full of soil. Behind him bounced a little girl with wild curls and her father's warm eyes. "You came," Emma exclaimed, running up to Natalie. "Daddy said you might be too busy." "I promised," Natalie said, kneeling down to Emma's level. "And I keep my promises." Emma studied her seriously. "Do you know how to plant flowers?" "Not really." "Will you teach me?" The little girl's face lit up like sunrise. "I'm an excellent teacher." "Daddy says so?" Ryan smiled, something soft and unguarded crossing his features. Come on, we've got work to do. The morning unfolded in dirt and laughter. Natalie learned the difference between annuals and perennials, how to transplant seedlings without damaging their roots, and that earthworms were actually helpful despite being slimy. Emma narrated everything with the confidence of someone who'd found her calling at age 7. Other volunteers worked nearby. It's mostly families and older residents who clearly knew Ryan well. They greeted him with warmth and treated Emma like everyone's favorite niece. Natalie watched how he moved through this space, helping an elderly man lift a bag of mulch, showing a teenager proper pruning technique, listening to a young mother talk about her struggles with patience and grace. This was who he was. Not just a handyman, but someone who built community one garden bed at a time. You're staring, Ryan said, appearing beside her with 2 bottles of water, just observing. And what do you observe? She accepted the water, choosing her words carefully. That you're good at this? Not just the gardening, but making people feel valued. It's not that hard. Most people just want to be seen. In my world, being seen is about power and status. Maybe that's the problem with your world. The words weren't cruel, just honest. Natalie took a long drink of water, tasting truth in the simple statement by afternoon. They'd planted 24 rose bushes along the garden's border. Emma had convinced Natalie to help paint a mural on the tool shed, which resulted in more paint on their clothes than the wall. As the sun began its descent, Ryan suggested ice cream. They walked to a small shop 3 blocks away. Emma skipping between them and chattering about her upcoming school play. She'd been cast as a flower in the spring production, which she considered the most important role in theatrical history. Will you come watch me? Emma asked Natalie suddenly. The question caught her off guard. When is it? Next Friday. Daddy always comes, but it would be extra special if you were there too. Natalie glanced at Ryan, who shrugged. No pressure. She asks everyone she meets. That's not true, Emma protested. Only people I like. Something cracked in Natalie's carefully constructed walls. This little girl with dirt under her nails and paint in her hair had decided to like her, without knowing about her company or her success or her connections, just because. I'll try my best, Natalie said carefully. Promise? She looked into those hopeful eyes and felt herself surrender. Promise. Emma beamed and grabbed her hand, sticky fingers wrapping around Natalie's perfectly manicured ones. As they walked toward the ice cream shop, hand in hand with a 7-year-old and her father, Natalie Brooks realized something. It's terrifying. She didn't want this day to end, and that meant everything was about to change. When reality comes calling, Monday morning hit like cold water. Natalie sat in her corner office overlooking Manhattan, staring at emails that demanded immediate attention. Her assistant had scheduled back-to-back meetings for the entire week. There were contracts to review, investors to court. In a major property acquisition that required her full focus, the phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. Just a photo of Emma holding a sunflower nearly as tall as she was. With the caption, "She insisted I send this to you." Natalie smiled despite the pressure crushing her chest. She typed back, "Beautiful. Tell her I said hi." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then appeared again. Miss you, 2 simple words that carried the weight of everything unsaid. She stared at them, thumb hovering over the keyboard. What could she say? That she missed him too? That Saturday had been the best day she'd had in years. That the thought of going back to endless work and empty penthouse made her want to scream? Her office door opened without warning. Gerald Preston, her primary investor and the man who'd helped launch her company, strode in with the confidence of someone who owned half her success. "We need to talk," he said. Sitting without invitation, Natalie set her phone down, shifting into business mode. What's wrong? The Riverside property? The sellers are getting cold feet. They've had another offer, and unless we move fast, we'll lose the deal. How fast? This week, which means you need to be available. No distractions, no personal commitments. This acquisition will double our portfolio value. Natalie's stomach sank. This week. Gerald's eyes narrowed. Is that a problem? No, she said automatically. Then, quieter. No problem. But as he launched into strategy and numbers, all she could think about was a school play on Friday, knighted a little girl who'd made her promise. Breaking points by Wednesday. Natalie had slept a total of 8 hours across 2 nights. The Riverside deal consumed everything. Conference calls at dawn, site visits at noon, legal reviews until midnight. She'd canceled drinks with friends, pushed back a speaking engagement, and hadn't responded to Ryan's last 3 texts. She told herself this was necessary. This was who she was. Success required sacrifice. Thursday afternoon, her phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Hello? Miss Brooks. This is Oakwood Elementary. We have Emma Mitchell here in the nurse's office. She's running a fever, and we can't reach her father. You're listed as an emergency contact? Natalie's heart stopped. I am. Yes, can you come pick her up? She looked at her calendar. A meeting with Gerald in 20 minutes to finalize the Riverside contracts. The most important meeting of the quarter? I'll be there in 15 minutes, she heard herself say. She grabbed her coat and bag, telling her assistant to reschedule everything. The car ride to Brooklyn felt eternal. When she rushed into the nurse's office, Emma was curled up on a small cot, face flushed and eyes glassy. Hey, flower girl, Natalie said softly, kneeling beside her. You came, Emma whispered. I knew you would. Something inside Natalie's chest shattered completely. She gathered the little girl carefully, signed the release forms, and carried her out to the car. Emma dozed against her shoulder during the drive to Ryan's apartment, trusting and vulnerable in a way that made Natalie's throat tight. Ryan's building was older, well-maintained, but modest. Natalie had texted him from the school, and he met them at his door, face etched with worry. Thank God, he said, taking Emma from her arms. I was on a job site with no signal. I'm so sorry you had to deal with this. Don't apologize. I'm glad I could help. She followed them inside. The apartment was small but warm, filled with Emma's artwork and photos of the two of them. Ryan settled his daughter on the couch with blankets and medicine, then turned to Natalie. You didn't have to do this. Yes, I did. She needed someone. You had that big meeting today? How did you know? You mentioned it. Saturday. While we were planting roses. He studied her face. You missed it for Emma. I can reschedule. Can you? His voice was gentle, but searching. Or will there always be another meeting, another deal, another reason why this doesn't work? The question hung between them, heavy with truth. I don't know, she admitted, her voice breaking. I don't know how to do this. How to be both people. The one who builds empires, and the one who picks up sick kids from school? Ryan moved closer, his hands finding her shoulders. Maybe you don't have to be both. Maybe you just have to be you. What if I don't know who that is anymore? Then let me help you remember. The choice Friday morning brought clarity. Gerald called, demanding to know why she'd missed Thursday's meeting. The sellers were wavering again. He needed her signature on revised contracts by end of business today. I can't, Natalie said. I have somewhere to be. Excuse me? I made a promise to someone. I'm keeping it, Natalie. This deal is worth millions. Whatever social obligation you have can wait. No, she said firmly. It can't. She hung up before he could respond. Her hand shook, but her heart felt steady for the first time in years. That evening, Natalie sat in an elementary school auditorium on a folding metal chair, surrounded by parents with cameras and grandparents with flowers. The stage was decorated with paper, trees, and cardboard clouds. Recorded music played through crackling speakers. Ryan slid into the seat beside her just as the lights dimmed. You came, he whispered. I promised. His hand found hers in the darkness. Fingers intertwining, the play was chaos and charm. Kids forgot lines, props fell over, and the backdrop ripped halfway through Act 2. But when Emma appeared in her flower costume, swaying and singing with absolute conviction, Natalie felt tears stream down her face. This mattered. Not the deals or the money or the corner office. This small moment of a little girl being brave in front of strangers, this was real. When the play ended, they waited outside the backstage door. Emma emerged still in costume, face glowing with excitement. She launched herself at Natalie. "You came. You really came." "Of course I did." Natalie hugged her tightly. "You were the best flower I've ever seen, really." "Absolutely." "Tony Award worthy." Emma giggled, then grabbed both their hands. "Can we get pizza? All three of us?" Natalie looked at Ryan over Emma's head. He smiled, warm and hopeful, and a little scared. "Pizza sounds perfect," Natalie said. New beginnings. 2 weeks later, Natalie stood in her office for the last time. She'd sold her shares in the company, negotiated a graceful exit, and was walking away from everything she'd built. Gerald thought she was insane. Her colleagues were shocked. But standing there, looking out at the city that had defined her for so long, she felt only peace. Her phone buzzed. Ryan, with a photo of a small storefront with a for lease sign. "What do you think?" He'd written, "Could be a garden design studio. Room for an office, if someone wanted to do consulting work on sustainable properties." Natalie smiled. "Could work. Want to take a look tomorrow?" "Tomorrow's good." "Emma wants to know if you're coming for dinner tonight. Tell her. I'll bring dessert. She'll hold you to that." "I'm counting on it," Natalie gathered her last box of personal items and walked out of her office. As she rode the elevator down for the final time, she didn't feel loss. She felt freedom. That evening, she sat at Ryan's modest kitchen table while Emma told elaborate stories about her day. Ryan cooked pasta with easy confidence, occasionally reaching out to squeeze Natalie's shoulder as he passed. The apartment smelled like garlic and laughter. After dinner, Emma asked Natalie to read her bedtime story. They curled up together on the small bed, surrounded by stuffed animals and fairy lights. When the story ended, Emma looked up at her with serious eyes. "Are you going to be my mom now?" Natalie's breath caught. "That's a big question. Daddy likes you a lot, and I like you a lot. So maybe you could stay." She glanced at Ryan, who stood in the doorway watching them with something raw and hopeful in his expression. "I'd like that very much," Natalie said softly. "If it's okay with both of you, it's okay," Emma said, hugging her tightly. Later, after Emma was asleep, Natalie and Ryan stood on his small balcony overlooking Brooklyn. The city hummed below them, alive and endless. "You gave up everything," Ryan said quietly. "I gave up what was killing me. I'm keeping what matters." He pulled her close, his arms strong and certain around her waist. "No regrets?" "Not one." He kissed her then, deep and sure. A promise of tomorrows she'd never planned but couldn't wait to live. Natalie Brooks had spent years building an empire. But standing on a small balcony with a landscaper and his daughter asleep inside, she realized she'd finally built something that would last. A home. A family. A life worth living. And that was worth more than all the corner offices in Manhattan.